without further ado, Pierre Poilievre, Leader of the Official Opposition and Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today, and thank you, Katie, for the introduction. I'm joined today by my fellow Conservative caucus members, though from British Columbia, Mark Dalton, and it's Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, and Frank Caputo from, is it Kamloops?
Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou, but he lives in Kamloops.
Kamloops is
so great to have them both here today. Here we have Ed Fast. Ed Fast has just walked in, a legendary member of our caucus and great servant of the people of British Columbia, who successfully brought home many excellent trade deals for Canada that have profited British Columbia richly, and he is a very well-respected member of our Conservative team. Thank you very much, Ed, for being here. As you know, Canada has become a much more dangerous and expensive country since Justin Trudeau took office. We see inflation at a 40-year high. Food prices are rising 11% a year. Gas prices have doubled. House prices doubled. Vancouver has become the third most inflated housing bubble of any city on planet Earth, worse than New York City, Los Angeles, London, Singapore, and countless other cities with more people, more money, and a lot less land. Young people who are 35 years old are stuck living in their parents' basements because they've lost the hope of owning a home under Justin Trudeau. We have mothers putting water in their children's milk because Trudeau's inflationary policies have driven up the cost of food. And we have workers who can't drive to their jobs because they can't afford the $2 a litre gas as a result of the NDP Liberal carbon tax. The costly coalition of Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau have pumped $500 billion of inflationary deficits into our economy, bidding up the price of the goods we buy and the interest we pay. And this costly coalition promised that interest rates would stay low forever, so that we should just take on as much debt as possible. Well, now, surprise, they're bursting the same bubble that they have inflated over the last 2 years. And it's not just the economy. It's our essentials. You know, children can't get access to, small children, toddlers and babies can't get access to basic pain relief medicines like Tylenol for kids. And so mothers and fathers are up at 3 in the morning trying to comfort screaming children who are teething or having a migraine. Even as south of the border, in Walgreens, the medicines are widely available for Americans. Here they are not in Canada. And then there's the crime that is terrorizing our streets. We see tent cities in Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, Toronto. The NDP Liberal policies of flooding the streets with hard drugs, heroin, and other poisons have destroyed people's lives. Here in Vancouver and in British Columbia, the number of overdoses have doubled. Crime is up by a third since Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister. Well, that's what happens when you flood the streets with drugs, when you open the border to drug and gun smugglers, and when you allow violent repeat offenders to go back on the street to reoffend again and again and again. This Liberal NDP woke agenda is making our inner cities dangerous, and it is ruining the lives of working class people. That is the hurt Canadians are experiencing. My job is to turn that hurt into hope, and that's why I'm running for Prime Minister. I didn't come from a privileged background. I was born of a 16-year-old unwed mother who put me up for adoption, but she always taught me that, about my parents always taught me, who were two school teachers, that it didn't matter where I came from, it mattered where I was going. It didn't matter who I knew, but what I could do. And that's the kind of country I want my kids to inherit, and that's why I'm running for Prime Minister. So what does that mean in a practical sense? Well, first of all, we have to end this inflationary spending. where a Poilievre government's going to bring in a pay-as-you-go law to cap government spending. So every time we bring in a new dollar of spending, we're going to find a dollar of savings to pay for it, so that we no longer drive up the debt, taxes, and inflation on our people. We're going to cancel the Trudeau NDP plan to triple the carbon tax. Canadians cannot afford to pay more for gas, heat, and groceries. So we're going to cancel the triple tax that Trudeau and Singh want to impose on Canadians. We're going to reform our tax system to reward work again. Right now, when people earn an extra dollar, they lose as much as 80 cents in clawbacks and taxes, which punishes people for the crime of working hard every day. We want to change the tax system so that it rewards hard work rather than punishing it. And, instead of creating more debt, we have to creating more cash. We need to create more of what cash buys. Grow more food, build more houses, and produce more energy here in Canada. So that means that I'm going to incentivize cities to allow more home construction. We need our big cities to get out of the way and let builders build. Right now in Vancouver, $650,000 of the average new housing cost is government bureaucracy, permit delays, development charges, taxes. That's why it's so expensive. People can't get home. So I'm going to link the number of dollars big cities get from the federal government for infrastructure to the number of houses that actually get built, to incentivize the municipalities to lower the cost and increase the speed of building permits. Let's build more homes. I'm going to sell off 15% of the 37,000 federal buildings so that we can convert those into housing for our young people. In other words, stop printing money and start building homes. I'm going to speed up economic immigration so we can bring in more skilled tradespeople from other countries to build houses here in this, because we have a labor shortage. We have 1.2 million people in a backlog waiting to immigrate to Canada. They could be helping us build the houses that we need. But unfortunately, they sit waiting on a list while Trudeau twiddles his thumbs. We're going to get the government out of the way, build more homes, and create more paychecks. We're going to grow more food by taking off the taxes and tariffs that Trudeau has imposed on the fertilizer and fuel of our farmers. We should be able to grow affordable Canadian produce to feed our people. And finally, we're going to harvest our resources in this country. I'm going to get rid of the anti-energy laws so we can produce our own oil and gas. I'm going to allow more natural gas liquefaction facilities, including right here in British Columbia. BC has hydroelectricity, cold weather, which helps liquefy gas, and the shortest North American shipping distance to Asia, so that we can send our natural gas to China and India and other countries to replace coal-fired electricity and protect our environment. We're going to allow for more mining of lithiums for the future electric car batteries, graphite, copper, and other essential minerals that will go into the battery economy of the future. We should not be importing all of these batteries and these electric cars when we have the minerals here. Bloomberg says Canada is the fourth richest country in the world when it comes to the minerals needed for electric cars. However, we produce almost none of those minerals. How are we going to do it? Speed up permits. It takes 5 or 6 years to get permits to dig a mine in Canada. They can get those permits in 7 or 8 months in other countries. We can protect the economy, but we can do it more quickly. Keep our environmental standards high, but speed up the decision on whether or not companies meet those standards so that we can produce the essential minerals of a green economy right here in this country. That's how we fight climate change. We do it through technology and not taxes. In other words, we want to put people back in charge of their lives with safe streets and big, powerful, inflation-proof paychecks. And I'll close on this point. We have thousands of immigrants in Canada who are banned from working in their professions because they're not recognized by professional licensing bodies. Meanwhile, we have a doctor shortage. It boils my blood to be sitting in a waiting room with my daughter who's got a migraine headache with other children screaming and crying because there aren't enough doctors, but we have immigrant doctors that are qualified that can't get licensed. So a Poilievre government is going to work with the provinces to sign a deal, speeding up skills recognition, so that every immigrant who applies to work in their field gets a yes-no answer based on their tested abilities, not based on where they come from, within 60 days. We should also I'm going to extend 30,000 small study loans so that immigrants who need time off work to study up to the Canadian standard and get licensed can do so. And finally, we're going to create modules for every single licensed profession to allow future immigrants who are waiting to come to Canada to begin getting their license to practice in their field before they even arrive. So while they're waiting in their home country, they're waiting to be processed to come to Canada, they can begin working through the licensing process so that when they get here, they can immediately go to work as doctors, engineers, architects, and countless other high-paying professions. This is how we're going to remove the gatekeepers, build stronger paychecks, and give people control of their lives. That's my purpose. That's why I'm here. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thanks. We can now open up the floor for questions. As a reminder, please raise your hand and identify the outlet that you work for. We can start right here.
Hi, my name is Naveed. I'm from Shaw Multicultural and also represent Toronto 360. You have actually mentioned on your very first point dangerous inflation and everything else, gas prices, but BC is, I think, is getting a lot of hit as far as the middle class people concerned. We have seen people are just going to next door in Alberta, migrating already.
Yeah.
So, and affordability is not there.
Right.
You know, middle class was affording the home, and now the way the mortgage rates are going high, a lot of people are planning to leave. And
Right.
Our next door conservatives are asking them to just come and welcome them. That's a very open point.
Yeah.
My question here is to, yes, you have plans. What is your strategy, how you are going to deal with this, because BC is hurting, and how you're going to deal with our local provincial government, and what are your plans on taking care of this particular item?
Thank you. Well, I think it's clear that the costly coalition of Liberals and NDP have failed British Columbians, giving the people here among the highest real estate, most expensive real estate on planet Earth, some of the most expensive gas prices anywhere in North America, and some of the worst crime problems. This is the result of the NDP Liberal experiment. We're seeing the consequences now. So what are we going to do about it? One, I'm going to cancel the NDP Liberal plan to triple the carbon tax. Both Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau are supporting a plan to force BC to triple its carbon tax. That will raise gas prices, home heating prices, food prices will go through the roof. Only Conservatives will end that plan. Secondly, I'm going to require big cities that want federal infrastructure money to speed up building permits for housing so we can get more homes built. I realize that Vancouver is unique in that it has mountains and the sea nearby, but there still is places to build, and there are places that can be densified, but the permitting is too slow. You shouldn't have to wait 6-7 years to get a permit. You should be able to get it in a few months. And that is the only way we're going to add enough supply so that young British Columbians can afford to buy a home again. And finally, we're going to end this maddening experiment with flooding our streets with drugs and allowing multiple repeat violent offenders to go back out and again and again and again. I'm going to put resources into recovery. Recovery. We need to give addicts treatment. They are the victims. We should give them the chance to detox, to have a bed and counseling in order to get back on their lives. We can save these people's lives if we invest in recovery rather than supplying more and more dangerous drugs onto the streets.
Thank you.
Perhaps from the side of the room.
Pierre, well,
Yes.
I'm here on behalf of Channel 1 TV, but not only that one, on behalf of all Iranian people
Yes.
that you stole me, supporting them through the parliament, especially with IRGC.
Yes.
So my question is in regard of that one, which unfortunately after that missile attack, that unfortunately not only 55 Canadian, many other people had it, there was at least 2 years delay until they get recognized and they get banned, and it comes to that point that it's kind of a boiling point for all Iranians and kind of Canadian. But in that between, there was a time that many of them left Iran with so many fake IDs, and Canada was the wonderland for them. They wanted to come here, and I know there are many of them here. I can see faces, I can see, and I can recognize them by how they wear, how they look. So I know you banned, and you made it to be banned, which is, thank you so much, but there are already many of them there, and I'm quite concerned with the security reason of the Canadians. That's my concern, and that's why I'm here, that what do we do in the future of Canada with those fake IDs that are living with the normal people?
Okay, so first of all, the Trudeau government still has not criminalized the IRGC. We have a criminal terrorist list that includes organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda. That is the group, that is the list on which an organization needs to be placed in order for it to be banned in this country. Trudeau refuses to ban the IRGC, so it is legal right now for people to raise money for the IRGC, recruit, plan, and operate on behalf of that organization here in our country, even after that organization murdered 55 Canadians and another couple of dozen permanent residents of our country. Still, I've asked the Prime Minister about 10 times whether this is a terrorist organization. He refuses to say yes. I hear reports that there are some supporters and activists and collaborators of the IRGC living in Canada, taking the riches that they brought from having stolen from the Iranian people and now enjoying life in Canada. If you have any information about those individuals, their whereabouts and their identities, I encourage you to report those to the government. And if you have information about people using fake IDs to unlawfully access a visitor visa or to process immigration here, you also need to report that so that the authorities can investigate and expel them.
Yes, Mr. Poilievre, Liberal have increased the immigration level to 500,000 people in 2025. My friend Andrew McDougall wrote in the Ottawa Citizen, said this is a trap for you, and that's why you pretty much stay away from the issue of the level of immigrant. You mentioned about immigration, yes, you did, but you didn't comment on, is it too many, is it too little? How do you handle the cultural impact for the future immigrant to Canada to the local Canadian, and how about the composition of the Canadian? That is all the questions coming up, or where would they live, how could they survive, and there's so many questions, but haven't heard you comment on that. Are you trying to stay away from the issue, or can you talk about it? Please.
Yes. Well, my wife is a refugee from Venezuela, so I'm obviously a fan of immigration. Canada needs immigrants to support our economy. More than 100% of our labor force growth will come from immigration. Look, Trudeau can't even process the existing applications. We have 2.6 million people waiting, 1.2 million of whom are past the service standard, so a 1.2 million person backlog he's been unable to process. And then, because he has failed to stand up to the government gatekeepers in cities across the country, we don't have many immigrants come here and find it very difficult to gain housing. So the problem is that we have a government in Ottawa that, despite spending more on bureaucracy, can't actually process the immigration applications that are in the queue. That means that there are employers without workers, families separated from loved ones, and refugees stuck in danger who should be here. I believe that immigration levels will fluctuate annually based on demand. In a hot labor market, there'll be more demand by employers to sponsor new immigrants to come here as workers. When unemployment is higher, then that obviously slows down. When there is a major war or natural disaster in the world, refugee applications go up. When the world is calmer, those go down. When there are more families looking to reunite with loved ones abroad, then obviously family reunification applications go up. So what I'm saying in all this is that the immigration system should be based on the demand by employers to bring in new workers, by nonprofits to bring in and sponsor new refugees, and by family members looking to reunite with loved ones. And that we should end the incompetence in Ottawa that has led to these massive backlogs in processing times. And then finally, we need to remove the gatekeepers here in Canada to build more homes so newcomers can afford to buy a house, and to remove the gatekeepers in our professions so that professional immigrants who are trained doctors, engineers, etc., can actually get jobs working in their fields. So that is the approach that I take, and that is, I think, the best in the best interest of Canada.
How about the future cultural conflict? There must be impact.
I don't see that.
When we're talking about 500,000 people coming in over the year,
No, I don't see
the
that.
composition of Canada will change through time, isn't it?
Life is about change. Canada has always been in a state of change. We are a nation of immigrants. I don't worry about. I don't worry. I think there's no doubt that our immigration over the last century and a half has been essential to our success as a nation, and it will be essential to our success in the future. So, yes, we need our immigration system to be professional and to process applications in reasonable time frames, connect newcomers with jobs, apartments, schooling for their kids. All of those things need to happen. But I don't share the concern that you're stating.
Okay, thank you.
In the blue.
Yeah.
Yes. Fanny Chu from the Epoch Times. I have two questions. One is you're talking about the economy. You want to recover. Now the reality is like the Trudeau government have been giving money. Like recently, he will cancel the student loan for the students, and also he give money during the pandemic time. So I'm wondering how you can take some the specific measurement to recover the economy, because the recession will come in now very soon, and where's the money from?
Yeah. Well, the problem with Justin Trudeau and his costly coalition with the NDP is that they're running out of other people's money. You know, the government doesn't have any money. Everything the government gives you, it must first take away from you. They have to pay for it only three ways: taxing it, borrowing it, or printing it. Either way, you pay for it. You pay for taxes today, borrowing tomorrow, and printing through higher inflation, as we're seeing. There's no freebies. Everything has to be paid for. So the problem, Justin Trudeau can't control himself. You know, he said he was going to stop spending, and then this week he came out with $20 billion more in inflationary deficits with his fall economic update. $20 billion more in additional spending measures, over $30 billion in additional deficits. Let's look back at the spending. So you had $500 billion of spending in the last 2 years. 40% of it had nothing to do with COVID, according to his own parliamentary budget officer. New bureaucracy, new programs, new handouts to special insiders. He gave $54 million to create the ArriveCan app. That didn't work. We didn't need it. It wrongly sent 10,000 people into quarantine, even though they had been vaccinated and tested negative for COVID. He tried to give $500 million to the We Charity, which had given his family money. He kept paying the CERB benefit to people even after the economies were reopened and there were 1 million vacant jobs. But we were paying people not to work when there are businesses begging for workers. He gave wage subsidies to companies that had so much money they were able to pay out bonuses to their executives and dividends to their shareholders. He did all of this even though inflation was rising. And now we're paying the price with higher food prices, higher gas prices, higher home prices. There's a cost for everything. And the more he spends, the more things cost. It's just inflation. That's why I want to cap government spending and bring in a law that says every time the government brings in a new dollar of unbudgeted spending, they have to find a dollar of savings to pay for it. And we have to reform our taxes and remove the red tape so we produce more stuff. Instead of producing more cash, we need to produce more of what cash buys. Food, homes, energy. And that's what we're going to do.
You had a follow-up?
Sorry.
Yep.
I'm wondering that for now, they currently they found out they have a police station established by China, and it feels like we are here in Canada. We feel threatened by those kind of establishment. So, what do you think about those police stations?
It's totally unacceptable for any foreign government to have police stations in Canada, period. There is no justification for that, and I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to tell Canadians if in fact it's true that there are foreign police stations in the country, and if there are, they need to be shut down.
In the green? Yep.
Yep.
My name is David Chen from Singapore Daily. Just also found a question regarding the relationship between Canada and China. Because we know the Canada stand up with Ukraine. But if China invades Taiwan, so what's your opinion about it? Do you think what should Canada do about it, that issue? And also we see the Trudeau government probably will review the Indo-Pacific policy soon. So what's your explanation?
Well, we need to stand up for Canadian values of human rights, freedom, and democracy. And that is what guides conservatives. We also need to stand up for Canadian interests, including our security and our economy. And those are the principles that will guide me in my policy towards all countries, including China. We call on all the parties in Asia to pursue peace and respect democracy. Canada is a country that always favors peace, human rights, and democracy, and that's what guides us in all matters related to countries around the world.
So does that mean you're going to stand up with Taiwan if that thing happens?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on what might happen. Other than to say we reject violence and aggression, and we encourage all countries to respect freedom and democracy.
Thank you. A lot of times, for instance, startups, they start their base here, they grow, and then they just move south the border.
Yeah.
And we basically have a brain drain, and we have the best and brightest here in Canada, and specifically in BC. There are a lot of conversation about the role of natural resources in our economy, in terms of power. There are a lot of conversation about other sources to drive our economy. But this is a challenge that we have. What are your plans to keep the talents in Canada, and what is going to be a competitive advantage when we're dealing with a powerful neighbor like the United States?
So here's the problem. We've set up an economy that pays the cost of developing technology, but does not reap the benefit of that technology. So we subsidize the R&D, and through the money-losing phase of a company's life cycle. Lots of grants, government loans, university partnerships. And then what happens is that the R&D turns into profitable intellectual property, and the owners say, is Canada a good place to make profit? Of course not. Not right now. It's better for them to go to lower taxed, foreign jurisdictions and they take their IP to Switzerland, Singapore, the United States, Ireland, and other places where it is more welcoming of business to get a return. So through the life cycle of the technology, we get all the losses and other countries get all of the profits. So how do we fix that? Well, one, we should not be giving subsidies for IP that's going to be sold internationally. If we subsidize the IP, there should be written into the agreement that it must stay in Canada. Two, we need to lower our taxes so that when you convert technology into money, you want to stay in Canada. And so we, as Conservatives, in the last election, we ran on a plan that would allow, it was called a patent box, a lower rate of taxation on income derived from newly patented technologies, so that the technology stays here and earns its profits here, employing Canadians. But look, our income tax are so high as well that when our young people graduate, they have lots of debt, and they want to make the most possible take-home pay they can. So what do? They go to places where they pay lower taxes. So we pay to educate them, and then they take their brains to other places. And we become the losers. We pay for all the losses, and everyone else gets the benefit. We got to end that and make this the best place in the world, not just to develop technology, but to keep it.
May I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
It's unrelated, but it's very important nowadays. What is your opinion of the non-withstanding clause? I know it's coming up again, but in general, do you think we should keep it as a country?
Well, I'm not in favor of reopening the Constitution. You'd have to reopen the Constitution to remove the notwithstanding clause, and changing the Constitution would require 7 provinces representing 50% of the nation's population to agree. And that would be a massive distraction. We've tried with the Meech Lake and Charlottetown Accords to reopen the Constitution. It was a monstrous distraction. And then every interest group wants to have their change inserted as well. So I don't think we should open the Constitution. I think we should work within our existing constitutional framework to protect the rights of every single Canadian, and to focus on the practical things that affect their lives.
We have time for a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Gentleman in the back has been waiting.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ritesh from
Yeah.
Red FM. Coming back to the point, you mentioned about the de-addiction programs and you want the drugs to be off the streets.
Yes.
A problem which is quite quintessential to this part of the country, that is, we're talking about Vancouver and
Yeah.
Port Town. Have you identified the fault lines? Because this activity, the drug trade, the cartels running, is something that is not new. This is something that's not been there for the last few years, it's been there for decades. So have you been able to identify the real fault lines and any structural changes in terms of how the enforcement agencies work, in terms of the provincial forces and the federal agencies work? Do you think something needs to be done drastically to take care of the situation? Have you been able to thrash that thing out?
Yes, so 3 things. 1, we need to hold the multinational corporations that originally brought the opioids to North America accountable for what they did. They deliberately brought it here. They encouraged it, its over-prescription, and they flooded our streets with these opioids, and they made a fortune doing it. And that's why the American government has sued, for example, Purdue and other pharmaceutical companies. They're the ones that started this, and they should pay the price. Second, we need to stop spending all this money going after law-abiding hunters and farmers, and instead put the money into border security to keep the smuggling, to end the smuggling of both illegal drugs and guns into our country. Third, repeat violent offenders need longer prison sentences. Trudeau has reduced the sentences for repeat violent offenders. Now, I'm not talking about a young person who makes one mistake or even an addict. Those are not violent offenders in and of themselves. I'm talking about the gangsters and the gun smugglers who do violence over and over and over again. When they've committed 40, 50, 60 violent offenses, they should be in prison. Finally, the resources need to be shifted from harm reduction, which is what they're doing now in Vancouver and which Justin Trudeau has endorsed, which allows easy access to these drugs, over to detox and recovery. How do we know this works? Well, they're doing it in Alberta. They have cut overdoses in half in Alberta. And what are they doing? They're giving addicts the opportunity to get inpatient care. You go into a treatment center, separated from your addiction. You're given detox medications to help get the poisons out of your system. You get access to a counselor who helps deal with the underlying cause of the addiction. And you're there for 60 to 90 days to clean out your body, break your dependence on the drug, and deal with the underlying psychological problems that got you into the trouble in the first place. That is the plan to put an end to this.
I know you've been waiting for a
Can I
while.
jump in one question related to the drug addict one?
Yeah.
Right now, the province of Alberta can handle it because health is belong to provincial government. Whatever you say, you can't do much of it because the only criminal act is federal.
Okay.
Health is provincial. No matter what you say, you can't change that. This is how BC government running our province. Unless you change all the drug problem into a criminal problem, then the federal government will take it back to control it, right? Please.
Okay, so a couple of things. One, you mentioned what is the federal role? One is border security.
Yeah.
That's strictly federal. Second is criminal code. What I propose to change with respect to the criminal code is penalties for serious violent offenders, repeat offenders. And I'm not talking about addicts. Again, I'm talking about people who do violence. 3, the federal government partners and provides funding for a whole series of drug initiatives. My approach would be to put that funding towards recovery and treatment. And I would partner with the provinces to make available more beds for addicts with full service, top to bottom, detox, treatment, and recovery. That's how I would do it.
Last question to the lady in red.
I'm serving with the rights media, and last month I met Lieutenant Singh and asked him a question.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility, I asked Mr. Singh, is there any possibility that you break up with the liberals and work with the conservatives? And what he said was that due to the ideological differences, there is possibly no possibility. So my question is, what can you really do until the next election is called upon? And what are you going to do to win this election so that all your policies and we can be implemented?
Well, thank you. There is a big difference. The NDP and the Liberals want higher taxes, more debt, and heavier inflation. Conservatives want less debt, less tax, and less inflation. And the Liberals and NDP want a weak on crime policy that has caused the chaos in our big cities. Conservatives want to put repeat violent offenders in jail and give treatment to our addicts. So there's a big difference between those two sides. And at the end of the day, Canadians are going, sooner or later, Canadians will have to choose between those two options. And really, Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau are the same.
Yeah.
They agree on everything. That's why we call them the costly coalition. So do you want common sense conservatives or a costly coalition? That will be the decision for British Columbians and Canadians.
All right, that brings us to can we
Oh,
do
yes.
one more quick one?
Yeah, my name is Young. I'm from the Korea Daily newspaper. As you know, the starting of COVID-19, many countries is now going to Canada, giving more money and taking more money.
Yeah.
And as you know, the inflation, the higher home prices, higher energy prices, is that only trouble in Canada, but it's international trouble. But as you know that I have never experienced any good solution about solve this problem. So it's easy to condemn current government, but as you know that there is no any alternative or any good plan to help solve this kind of problem. So I want to know what's the clear and simple solution for this kind of issue.
Well, the simple solution is to do what the Swiss did. Switzerland did not print money. Switzerland balanced its budget. And what happened? Switzerland has the lowest inflation in Europe, 3%. Switzerland has the lowest unemployment in Europe, strong growth, and the powerful Swiss franc. So that's the answer. Why is it that all of Europe has high inflation except Switzerland? Well, it's because Switzerland has its own money, the franc, and the euro is managed and mismanaged by the European Central Bank, which printed money just like the Americans did, just like Canada did, just like the British did. But let's be clear. Just because other countries abused their money and caused out-of-control inflation doesn't justify us doing the same thing. Like when we were kids, our mother said, just because your friends are jumping off a bridge doesn't mean you have to jump off a bridge. We could have done things differently. We didn't have to spend $500 billion. 40% of that spending had nothing to do with COVID. We didn't have to pay people to stay home when the economy was reopened and there were 1 million vacant jobs where businesses were begging for workers to come back. Trudeau was paying them to stay away. We didn't have to give billions of dollars to profitable companies that were paying out bonuses to their executives and their shareholders. We didn't have to give $54 million to the wasteful ArriveCan app. I could go on and on and on with all the examples of the unnecessary spending. Sure, we had to help people who were shut down because of COVID. We had to give them some income to replace. But we didn't have to do all of the other things that I just mentioned. And finally, we didn't have to abuse our money printing press. In the financial crisis of 2008 and 9, we did run deficits. Small ones, but we ran them. How do we do it? We borrowed real money from financial markets, from real lenders. We didn't have our central bank print the money. Why is that important? Because when you grow the money supply, you drive inflation. They've printed $500 billion of new cash in 2 years. 1 in every $5 in the economy today was created since 2020. We've had a 27% increase in the money supply, even though the economy has grown by 2.7%. In other words, we've grown our money supply 10 times faster than we have grown the goods and services that money buys. And even now today, Trudeau's spending is 30% higher than it was right before COVID. Why? COVID's done. Why are we still spending 30% more? I thought the money was all for COVID. So there's no more COVID, but we still have the spending. This is irresponsible government that spent too much and spent irresponsibly, and now Canadians are paying the price.
Great.
My question is, as you know, that the Swiss is a small country, and Singapore and Hong Kong is a small country. It's
Yeah.
a very easy country, and the span of the rich and the poor is very narrow. But Canada or any other countries, their span of the rich and the poor is too high. So the situation is far different. So, and as you the higher home prices, we need more immigrants, and they come in Canada, and they build more house. So the house prices are getting higher. It's not a certain issue. So everything is connected with other trouble and other solutions. So it's very easy. It's not easy way to make a solution. So I want to know, just reducing taxes or any simple things is already mentioned by any politicians before you. So if you have some new strategy or plan to solve this inflation or those kind of the hot issue in the world, would you give me some simple sentence on that, please?
Well, yeah, we first of all, we need to cap government spending by bringing in a law that requires the government find $1 of savings for every new $1 of spending measures. Second of all, we need to speed up approval for projects. You mentioned you're from Korea originally. In the OECD, Korea is the fastest building permit of any of the countries. The average building permit takes 28 days in Korea, South Korea. In Canada, it's 250 days. We have the second slowest building permits on average across the OECD. Only the Slovak Republic is slower than us. And what does this have to do with inflation? Well, it slows down the construction of housing. We have fewer houses, you have higher prices. Slows down the construction of factories, warehouses, mines, pipelines. That means we get less manufactured goods and energy produced here in Canada. So we should set the goal to beat South Korea. We should be the fastest place in the OECD to get building permits at all three levels, municipal, provincial, and federal. So that instead of just creating all this cash, we can create more of what cash buys. Produce the stuff that money actually buys. And that's how we'll increase the purchasing power. I'll close on this. If you have 10 loaves of bread and $10 in your economy, it's $1 for each loaf of bread. If you double the number of dollars to 20, but you still have 10 loaves of bread, well, all of a sudden, it's $2 for a loaf of bread. Well, what if instead of that, we double the amount of bread we make? We have 20 loaves of bread and $10. Well, all of a sudden, it's 50 cents for a loaf of bread. If you want to bring down the cost and increase the purchasing power of our money, we have to produce more stuff. And that means getting the government out of the way and letting builders build, farmers farm, and workers work. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to take your business card and
Thank you.
exchange, and we'll make sure that your question